The Last Exodus. Chapter 1. The Start of the End. The Great Hall of Factions had been built to make people feel small. Its arches rose like the ribs of an ancient giant. Its pillars carried the history of every faction that had ever fought, failed, forgiven, and returned to the same table. Above it all, the ceiling opened into a vast painted dome of stars. To anyone else, it was beautiful. To Zeke, that morning, it felt like a warning. At the center of the hall stood the circular table of the 7 factions. 7 seats, 7 leaders, 7 different histories carrying the same fear. Zeke sat to the right of his father, watching the room settle into a silence that seemed too heavy for marble walls to hold. His father was the kind of leader people trusted before he even spoke. Calm, steady, certain, but even he could not soften the truth forever. Home was dying. The resources were running out. The ground was changing beneath them. The signs had been there for years, but now the problem had become impossible to ignore. If their people stayed where they were, the future would not simply become difficult. It would end. Zeke looked around the table and saw what no one wanted to say aloud. The leaders were afraid. Then he spoke. If there was no answer on their planet, maybe the answer waited somewhere beyond it. The Jaos had always been known for their knowledge of the stars. They understood the sky better than any other faction. So Zeke suggested what would have once sounded impossible. Find another world. Elias, the leader of the Jaos, did not dismiss the idea. Instead, he revealed that his people had already begun searching. Far beyond their system, they had found a possible candidate. A distant planet in the habitable zone of its star. A place with little sign of existing life. A place that might become a new home. For one brief moment, hope moved through the great hall. Then Zeke's father asked the question that mattered most. How long would it take to reach it? Elias did not answer quickly. That was enough to tell everyone in the room that the truth would not be easy. With their current technology, the journey would take approximately 1,000 years. The hall changed. The hope did not vanish, but it became heavier. A new planet was no longer just a destination. It was a promise no living person in that room would ever see fulfilled. No one at the table would stand beneath that alien sky. No one alive would build the first home there. Their descendants would have to finish what they began. Zeke felt the weight of it settle across his shoulders. This was not just a rescue mission. It was a message sent into the future. His father restored order with a raised hand. The decision could not be made lightly. Every outcome had to be considered. Every faction had to survive the journey. They could not simply flee the end. They had to carry civilization through it. And so the impossible began to take shape. Ark-Ships, not vessels for exploration. Entire worlds built inside machines. Ships large enough to carry the people, histories, skills, beliefs, and fragile hopes of every faction across the dark between stars. The meeting ended, but Zeke did not feel relief. He kept looking at his father. At the time, Zeke believed he understood the man beside him. But there was something in his father's voice that day, something hidden under the calm, that suggested he knew more than he was ready to say. When the room emptied, his father asked him to walk. They left the great hall and stepped into the garden outside. The air smelled of flowers and water from the fountain. For a moment, the world almost seemed peaceful. Zeke asked if his father truly believed they could succeed. His father did not offer false comfort. Success was never guaranteed. Faith, unity, and determination were the strengths they had left. If the factions could believe in their purpose, and in one another, they might still have a chance. It should have steadied Zeke. Instead, it made him realize how much depended on him. Soon the garden was behind them, and the planning room became the center of their world. Holographic displays filled the air. Engineers, scientists, and leaders from every faction gathered around blueprints that had not existed the day before. The builders of faith would shape the structure. The keepers of the earth would design systems that could sustain life. The guardians of knowledge would push the technology farther than it had ever gone. The Jaos would continue mapping the impossible path through the stars. Every faction had a place. Old divisions had to become strengths, because there was no time left for pride. By the end of the first day, Zeke was still in the planning room, staring at the work in front of him. Could they build the ships in time? Could they save anyone at all? His father entered quietly and placed a hand on his shoulder. Zeke did not have to carry the burden alone. They were all in it together. Those words helped, but only for a moment. Leadership was not just about giving orders. It was about standing where fear lived and refusing to let it make the decisions. That night, father and son worked side by side. Plans were revised. Problems were named. Solutions were sketched and rebuilt. For a few hours, Zeke could almost believe that effort alone might be enough. His father told him his mother would have been proud. The words stayed with him long after exhaustion finally pulled him towards sleep. Morning came too quickly. Zeke was late for another meeting when he nearly collided with Sarah in the corridor. Sarah belonged to the Jaws faction. As children, they had spent countless hours together while their parents sat through meetings like the ones now deciding the fate of the world. But years had passed. They were no longer children playing in the shadow of power. They were adults watching that power run out of answers. Sarah had heard about the meeting. She knew things were becoming serious. She also admitted something that struck Zeke harder than he expected. She wished women like her were allowed into those rooms. She wanted to help, but tradition kept her outside the circle. Zeke promised that when he was in charge, things would change. Her voice deserved to be heard. So did the voices of others kept away from decisions that shaped every life on home. For a brief moment, the crisis around them softened. Then the future called him forward again. Inside the next meeting, Elias and the scientists showed the projected route to the distant planet. The scans were promising, but the distance remained brutal. 1,000 years. That number returned like a blade. Even if the ships could be built, how could their people survive a 1,000-year voyage? Generations could be born and die inside the vessels before they ever arrived. Then Zeke asked a different question. Could the people sleep through the stars? Lao, the elder of the Guardians of Knowledge, admitted that suspended animation was possible in theory. The body could be slowed to something like hibernation, but the technology was experimental. The real challenge was not putting people to sleep. It was waking them again. The chambers would have to function for centuries. The energy systems could not fail. The people inside would be trusting their lives to machines and hope. Zeke's father did not reject the danger. He said they would explore it. Then came the next question. How much time did they truly have? The answer was worse than anyone wanted. Home's core would become unstable within 2 years. After that would come earthquakes, eruptions, surface failures, and collapse. 2 years. 2 years to design the ships. 2 years to build them. 2 years to decide who would board them and how a civilization would say goodbye. At least 7 Ark-Ships would be needed. 1 for each faction. The room grew quiet again, but this silence was different. It was the sound of everyone understanding that hesitation had become a luxury. Zeke did not know what the coming months would bring. He did not know what secrets his father still carried. He did not know what the journey would take from him, or what it would leave behind. But he knew one thing. They had no choice but to move forward. It was survive or lose everything. And looking back, Zeke would one day wonder if trying to save the world had cost him something he could never recover. Time with his father. Time with the people he loved.